They had made it back to the cliff, and all his things were still there. Oh, there is a God, he had thought, as he hugged his precious little quad bike. This meant food and shelter too, which was nice since the dragonette seemed to have neither, apart from some snacks. Perhaps they hadn't been planning on sleeping out. That would mean their home was less than a day away. Well, flying at least. He got out some fresh clothes and used some of the water from the little barrel to finally get cleaned up somewhat. They at least had the decency to pretend to look away while he put on his fresh clothes, even if he was certain they were trying to get a glance out the corners of their eyes. Well, he was probably as alien to them as they to him, if not more. He wondered if they had stories about humans here, like there were stories of dragons back home. After he had begun handing out the funny, clear containers for the deer, to Sapphire's nose it was probably killed yesterday. The tent he had brought along also came out along with a bunch of other equipment. Dakota got the gist and started ordering the others about. Sapphire was taken up to the top of the cliff. It seemed they still wanted to sleep up on the top. Well, there wasn't much he could do to stop them. Besides, they knew more about this place than he did, so there was probably a good reason. It was a little difficult setting the tent up on the cliff top with no dirt and all, but he had managed it with a little help and some big rocks. It would be a bit cramped with 6 people in it, but not too bad. Everything he had taken out was meticulously inspected after he was done using it. The tent and food boxes seemed especially interesting. They had probably never seen plastic or nylon, and yet could still relate to it at least somewhat. It wasn't like the solar chargers, which just got a quick glance. His fire and steel had caused quite the stir too, wood for the fire having been brought by Fengi. He had to confiscate the steel from Jackalope after she kept making sparks with it. He couldn't have her wearing it out already. The meal he made had gone over very well too, it seemed. He had taken the opportunity to test some of his different spices of them. Chili hadn't been a hit, but almost everything else had gone over well, and when he brought out a box of hard candy for dessert, he honestly thought they were going to eat his hand. He had hastily given them another when they were done with the first. Sweet tooth well and truly confirmed. Sapphire was starting to wonder if this day was stranger to her, or the guy they had rescued, when Tom had started pulling out boxes and bags of things. It was clear he was prepared to camp out for quite a while. He had freshly killed meat, some sort of magic fire starter, a tent made of silk, spices of many kinds, and the best things Sapphire had ever tasted. He had called them candy. It was like a hard, solid chunk of pure sweetness, and fruity too. Apparently you just sucked on it rather than crushing it, probably to make it last longer. Even Jackalope did as she was told and didn't break it. It had been heaven, and he'd given them 2. Each. Like, how rich was this guy? When it had been time for bed, he had given her a kind of sleeping bag. It was made out of the same dark green and black silk as the tent. This pattern must mean something. It was on nearly everything here. She had gotten into it very carefully as not to scratch it with her claws. It was so warm and comfortable. She had felt as if she was sleeping in the middle of the day, in the middle of summer. As she curled up inside, and sleep came quickly. She had been excused from guard duty due to her injuries, and Dakota had thought it more than fair that Tom, being kind of their host now and being injured too, was also excused. Not that they knew how to tell him to sit guard anyway. The next morning, Sapphire was up first, the nice sleeping bag warming her up much faster than any of the others lying about the tent. But Tom was up already, it seemed. She couldn't get out without help though, so she just lay there thinking for a while. How had he gotten here? And how was he so well prepared, seemingly rich, and yet seemed to have no clue what he was doing? It was a very contradictory conundrum. When Esmeralda had finally started to stir, she had jumped at the chance to get some fresh air. It was nice and warm in the tent, but it wasn't very large, and the air was getting quite stale. "Hey, you up yet, Essie?" "Yeah, I guess so. What is it?" "Think you can help me get out of this thing?" "Sure, hang on." Esmeralda was clearly still not quite up to temperature yet, but she got up and helped Sapphire out of the delicate prison cell. With her friend's help, she hobbled outside. It was a cool morning outside, and the sun was barely up yet. She almost wanted to go back in the warm tent, to be honest. Tom was sitting on a rock, writing in a book, it seemed, perhaps taking notes on what was going on. "Morning," she tried. He looked up, seemingly not having noticed them come out. "God Morgan," he answered. What a weird language. She guessed he had returned the gesture or perhaps asked how she was doing. She couldn't tell, but he seemed happy enough when she and Esmeralda had walked over to the fire and sat down. Saf winced. The pain was even worse today when she moved. It was getting unbearable, in fact. He seemed to notice and came over with another of the small bees he had given her yesterday and the water bottle. Maybe it's for the pain. That would make sense. It hadn't hurt this bad yesterday. She took the bead, but politely drank from her own water skin instead. She didn't need to take everything he had, after all. After that, he had shown her the book he was writing in. It seemed he was making some sort of map. It was the saddest map she had ever seen, but definitely a map. It had 4 locations scribbled on it, with lines going between them in a weird script, and one seemed to be the cliff. This guy is a moron, Essie. What did he do now? As morning had broken, Tom was up bright and early. The same couldn't be said for his travelling companions, though. Every last one of them had slept in. When he had gotten up, he relieved Fengi as the guard. He had just sat down, staring out over the horizon, wondering just what he had gotten himself into. At least things seemed to be improving. If he was correct, they were bringing him to their home. For what reason, he did not know, though he hoped he had made a good enough impression that it wouldn't be for some nefarious purpose. Besides, they seemed friendly enough, even jovial, at least some of them. He wouldn't mind staying with them for a while if he could. He had no doubt they would be exciting for quite a while. What kind of culture and architecture would people that can fly come up with? How technologically advanced were they? And what about magic? They clearly had some, but what could it do? Besides, it was hilarious to see how they reacted to some of the things he had brought with him, and if there were more where they came from, then he could carry on getting those reactions for quite some time to come. He chuckled at the idea of showing them their first movie. That was going to be glorious. He had gotten out his map book to note down what he could see from here to the best of his ability. He didn't notice when the dragoness started stirring. Mel Nakik, came from Sapphire, who had apparently woken up along with Esmeralda. Good morning, he retorted, assuming that was what she had said. As they walked over, it was clear Sapphire was in quite a bit of pain. He got out the painkillers he had put in his pocket and handed her one, cursing himself. He had had 3 already, and he forgot to give her some. Not cool. After that, he showed her his map to see if she could perhaps show where they were going. She turned her head and went, No menos hivri uvi malai, sounding as if she had just lost all hope for him. Esmeralda had answered, Svabal tirajaki tejaka. She sounded a little perturbed. Tom would need to start practicing those sounds, he thought to himself. He wondered if he could even produce them without wrecking his throat. Now was not the time, though. Tom knew his map wasn't great, but this seemed a little extreme. He held out his compass to see if they knew what it was. No luck, apparently. Well, shit. He had resorted to just pointing in various directions, hoping they would catch the meaning. After tilting her head a bit, Esmeralda pointed nearly due west, according to the current north at least. That was something at least. The others had slowly joined the world of the waking as the sun rose in the sky. Tom had made a quick breakfast, and they packed up the camp in no time. Tom was grabbed by the shoulders and flung back down again. He could get used to this kind of VIP treatment. That had been quite a climb, if he could get away with doing it without getting pounced on again, of course. As he was packing the quad bike, Fengi had even been kind enough to take down his rope for him, even if it was cut into 2 pieces. The dragoness had gathered around as he finished packing, seemingly waiting in anticipation to see how the thing was supposed to move. Oh, this was just the kind of moment he wanted. He made a space on top of the big, watertight chest, putting down his roll-up mattress there, and gestured for Sapphire to lay down. She seemed suspicious, but she got on eventually. Then Tom got on the quad bike and turned the key. With a very good breakfast done and the camp packed up, they had all gathered around the strange cart down on the ground. Tom had made a place for Sapphire to lay down. She reluctantly got into the cart and waited. Tom had mounted the smaller front part of the cart. It was clearly some kind of seat with bars for one to hang on to. And then the thing started purring loudly. Or perhaps it was a snarl. She wasn't quite sure. The others had taken a step back. And then it had started to move on its own. Tom made a short lap around, showing off, it seemed. He even straightened out a short bit, and the thing accelerated as the snarling grew louder, before coming back around, stopping in front of the others. They all stood there, awestruck, looking at it. This was the largest mechanical thing any of them had ever seen. Only stories of legend told of enchanted items of this size. No wonder he had been happy to see it again. She recovered from the shock, primarily by watching all the dumb faces her friends were making, not to mention Tom laughing his ass off at their expense this time. She smiled at them from her little throne, grinning from ear to ear at their faces. Seems there will be no need to switch carry today.